G'day guys, my name is CJ, and this is the perfect phone for the dumpster fire of the year that has been 2020. And not because this phone itself has class-leading specs, but precisely because it doesn't. Because smartphones have reached a point now where the performance gap between the highest end versus the mid-range is barely tangible. And so the Pixel 4a with its budget price and competitive performance is one of the most exciting phones of this year. A year of economic turmoil where budget products are more important than ever. The Pixel 4a is Google's cheapest smartphone ever, even cheaper than the 3a when it was released last year. And of course, that comes at a cost, but not as much as you'd think based on its price and not where it matters either. And so for this, I reckon this could be the perfect phone for 2020. This is my review, but first, let's unbox the phone. We're seeing the market for budget smartphones heat up this year thanks to the OnePlus Nord and the iPhone SE. Check out those videos if you haven't already. But the Pixel 4a is one of the best entries to the market yet. And I mean singular entry because to cut down costs, Google is only releasing one model with one size, one color, one storage option, and one price. Very simple. Now, classically, when we talk about budget smartphones, there always seems to be something, a quirk, a compromise that messes up the overall experience. Sometimes it starts with its materials, and yes, in a world of glass and metal, the 4a is made of a polycarbonate plastic unibody. But that means it'll take a few knocks better than your glass flagships. And of course, it doesn't feel anywhere near as premium, but in the same vein, it doesn't feel cheap. It feels really solid actually, and not at all fragile. The soft touch finish as well is nice, and the super useful fingerprint sensor simply melts seamlessly into the body. And then you've got buttons on the side that are super solid and clicky. Now, another way Google has kept costs down is by limiting its color options. Now, we might see other colors later on, but for now, it's just black. No, really. That's the name of the color. But in classic Pixel fashion, you get the nice little flare of a bright pastel green power button on the side. All of this combined results in a package that I think looks really and feels really elegant. Performance-wise, the compromises when combined with Pixel's well-optimized software doesn't seem to have any real effect on its experience. Now sure, it rocks a slower Snapdragon 730G, 6 gigs of slower RAM, and a slower 60Hz screen compared to the 90 to 120 beasts that we see these days. But if you haven't owned a flagship phone in the last 12 months, or even if you have, you'd never notice. Browsing the web, social media, multitasking, and generally navigating the UI has been really smooth. Occasionally on a photo or content heavy timeline, it does stutter just a little bit, but honestly not enough to affect the experience. And in fact, it just feels like I'm using any Pixel phone. That's to say it's great. Another aspect that often suffers from cheaper phones is when consuming content. Important things, like watching YouTube, listening to music, playing games, things like that. Now lucky the Pixel 4a does all of that really well. The screen is a 1080p AMOLED panel, so the colors and contrast are excellent as you'd expect, and it gets bright enough outside in daylight, and just has enough flexibility to use at really low brightnesses at night as well. There's also not much color casting either, which same can't be said about the OnePlus Nord. And then on top of that, you get stereo speakers, and they sound pretty good and loud too. Again, unlike the OnePlus Nord. Then to top it all off, it even has a headphone jack, which is really nice to see. No more awkward moments when your Uber driver hands you the aux cable. So overall, a media consumption master. Now, if there's one thing you can count on Pixels being a master of, is in photography. Now, despite its price, Google has continued the tradition of the Pixels by not compromising on photo quality. something that the majority of budget phones are guilty of. The Pixel 4a has the same main camera seen in the Pixel 4, and it shows. Comparing photos between the two, I couldn't spot any difference. Photos still show the typical pixel vibrancy, dynamic range, and detail. You've even got the live dynamic range slider that debuted with the Pixel 4 too. On top of that, portrait mode is also reliable, even with furry friends. You've got night sight, which still works like magic, and if you've got a tripod, well, you can still indulge in astrophotography too. I haven't had a chance to test it out myself, but if it's anywhere near as good as Pixel 4, you're going to be happy. Now, keeping on this trend, the selfie camera is a wide angle like the Pixel 4, and photos, I think we're seeing a trend here, is very typical Pixel in nature. They're color accurate, slightly cooler in temperature, super detailed, and almost a little too sharpened, especially so in portrait mode. The wider field of view also means more people can fit into the frame, though you're probably not going to do too much of that right now thanks to social distancing. Honestly, pound for pound, the Pixel 4a's camera basically matches the Pixel 4's camera in most ways other than lacking a telephoto lens. Now, the other aspect of cameras that Pixels tend to fall down on is in video. Now, the Pixel 4a can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second and has a 1080p slow motion at 120 frames per second. And, well, quality is as you'd expect with a Pixel, but in one area where they actually have improved slightly is in the microphones. And fidelity of the audio actually has improved, so in some ways, this is actually still a pretty decent overall package when it comes to its cameras. And aside from missing the telephoto lens, the only real downside with its photography is in its processing time. Now, camera hardware in these Pixels hasn't really changed since the Pixel 2, and as you can imagine, most of the heavy lifting is done through software. Now, the flagship Pixels, like the Pixel 4, have got a neural core which massively speeds this whole process up. But unfortunately, the 4a is missing this dedicated chip, and it really shows. After snapping away, you often have to wait a little bit for it to process before you can actually review the photo. And you can tell it's working hard because after shooting continuously for longer than maybe even just 5 to 10 minutes, the phone does heat up quite a bit. It's not going to cause third-degree burns, but it is certainly noticeable. And ultimately, when it's working that hard, it'll probably translate into battery drain too. But despite all of this though, with normal use, the Pixel 4a's 3140 mAh battery is actually pretty decent. Fun fact, it actually beats the flagship Pixel 4 for battery in both the size and use. Which, let's be honest, isn't exactly hard though, because the Pixel 4's battery life was downright bad. A lower resolution, lower refresh rate screen combined with a lower powered processor really works a treat here with battery life. I could easily get to the end of a full day with more than 20 to 30% left and regularly got around 6 hours of screen on time with my use. And that often includes a lot of social media and YouTube. There's also no wireless charging here either, which, for people like me is a bummer, but I think a lot of people interested in the 4a probably won't be so invested in wireless chargers anyway. And at this price, you could forgive them for leaving this out. But on balance, overall, I reckon the Pixel 4a as a package is pretty great. Coming into the second half of the year, this is one of Google's strongest releases yet. The simplicity of its specs and designs is its strength rather than weakness. You basically get the best of Google Pixel, the photography, the clean OS, robust update support, all in a really, really compelling price. And fun fact, I actually received Android 11 whilst I was reviewing the phone. Now, a 5G version of the 4a and the Pixel 5 will come at a later date this year, and at a higher cost, of course, but give us a like if you're keen to see these phones featured on the channel. But we live in a world where people are losing their jobs, businesses are failing, economies are tanking, and most people don't have the luxury to drop over $1,000 to $2,000 on a phone. They've obviously got other priorities at the moment, something called living. So at 599 Australian dollars or 350 US dollars, this phone becomes one of the easiest phones to recommend this year. For Android lovers, and indeed anyone, I honestly think this is as close as you can get to the perfect phone for 2020. Not because it's bleeding edge, but because it's relevant. But what do you guys think of the Pixel 4a? Is it something you're looking for? Let us know in the comments below. Now, I want to give a big thank you for making it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, give us a like. hit the subscribe button for more, ding the bell icon so you don't miss out. Stay safe out there, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Say good day to everyone for me. Cheers.